What's up, everybody? This is the Hedge Mage, and welcome back to another Pauper video. Another video about another new card that just came out in Murders at Karlov Manor. Doing a deep dive on this card. What decks you could use it in, how you can play it, what are the pros and cons of it. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely stick around. And if you'd like to support the channel, if you could leave a like on this video and hit that subscribe button, I would greatly appreciate it. And as always with these kinds of video, I have prepared a new brew for you guys, so if you can stick around to the end of the video, I will be giving a full run through on that deck list. And with that said, let's get into it. And the card that we're talking about today is Gravestone Strider for 2 generic mana. It's an artifact creature golem. For 1 generic mana, you can add 1 mana of any color, activate only once each turn, and for 2 generic mana, exile it from your graveyard and exile target card from a graveyard. It is a 1/3. So it's got a pretty nice size toughness, so it definitely makes itself a pretty decent blocker. That's one thing that I like about this is that it is a good blocker. It can help fix your mana and can hate on other people's graveyards and exile, maybe a ghostly flicker or an ephemerate when they drop an archaeomancer. Or when the Archaeomancer enters the battlefield, or possibly getting rid of a putrid goblin from Mogwart. So there's a lot of utility that this card can actually offer. And but then it comes down to what decks actually want to play this. And that's where it gets a little niche and a little bit awkward because I don't think, honestly, a lot of decks are going to want to run this. They're probably going to use some other type of utility artifact to hate on the graveyard, and mana fixing may not always be something that a lot of decks actually require. So they'll probably end up using a Nihil Spellbomb, Relic of Pargenitus, Tormod's Crypt for their utility artifacts to hate on graveyards. This is obviously only this is targeted removal and not exiling the entire graveyard. So most decks are probably going to use those type of artifacts over this just about, 100% of the time. There is one deck though that I think this card fits in very well with, and that is Alter Tron for a lot of different reasons. Okay, so well, one of the biggest reasons is just how it interacts with Ashnod's Altar. Seeing as you can sacrifice it, float 2 generic, and then exile it from your graveyard, paying that 2 generic to exile that card. You can do all of this at instant speed, which makes this card very useful for that. Not to mention its mana fixing, which since you are a Tron deck, you are on, 12 12 plus colorless lands, or lands that just add generic mana to your mana pool or colorless mana. So this helps with the mana fixing, and is a body on the field, so it kind of replaces the other artifacts that they would use to help do a little color fixing. You can also sacrifice this with your Deadly Dispute, draw a couple cards, get it in your graveyard in case you need to use it later. So there's a lot of different lines that you can use with this card in Altertron, and it definitely seems to add a bit of a interesting dynamic to the deck. And I mean, the biggest part is that it is a decent blocker, though. I mean, it does a lot of other stuff too, and all that stuff is really good. But one of the big downsides to playing Altertron is that you are a bit of a slower deck, and if you cannot get your infinite storm count going off and then playing your Weather the Storm, you are probably gonna just end up dying to like burn or aggro decks or any other faster decks out there, and especially if you cannot assemble Tron early on, and then also have all your combo pieces. So that's where the deck really struggles right now in the current meta game, is that there's a lot of decks that are faster than it. So this does add an extra body on the field, which I think is very very useful, and Altertron is definitely the place for this card. And if it wasn't obvious already, that's the deck we're talking about today. We are taking a look at a new brew for Altertron. All right, so let's take a look at what we got in our creature pile here. I got two copies of the card we talked about today, Gravestone Strider. I don't know if I would run more than two since I don't think you're going to need a lot of them. I would probably only run one to two. You could go down to one. I think two is a pretty nice spot for it, just to make sure we are fixing our mana, getting our green mana, getting our black mana exactly when we need it. Then we got two copies of Mirror Kinsmith, which is a tutor basically just for mirror retrievers, which is the core one of the core parts about the combo for Altertron is having at least two mirror retrievers. So Mirror Kidsmith kind of almost ends up being like copies 5 and 6, since you can use it to go grab the one that you need, especially if one gets exiled or exiled from your graveyard. You can use Mirror Kinsmith to grab another. Um, so you're gonna need at least two Mirror Retrievers to make your combo function. All right, and so in our sorcery pile, I just got three copies of Ancient Stirrings. This really helps us dig for maybe a piece that we need. We really need our altar, our golem foundry, our mirror retrievers, etc. Whatever we might need. We can hopefully find this. Hopefully find it with our ancient stern. So it's kind of what we got there. In our instance, I got four copies of Deadly Dispute. A bit of a staple in the format. This really helps us dig, draw more cards, create treasure tokens. So mana fixes helps us dig through our deck to find stuff that we need. Pretty great card. Then I got one copy of Rowan's Grim Search, for which this is a pretty interesting card. I've played it in Mogwarts. I've played it here in Altertron. I was on two copies. I've dropped it down to one because though it does let you dig quite a bit. Sometimes losing that two life really, really stings. And if you play it and you're not about to win the game, you can kind of just throw it to your opponent sometimes from that loss of life if you've cast this more than once, especially if they are on, maybe a mono red list or other type of aggro strategy. This card though it can really help you see a lot of your decks. You can see up to, I think it's about 6 cards. It can really hurt sometimes. So I've gone down to one just because of that, because sometimes I end up throwing the games just by playing it. And then we got three copies of Weather the Storm. This is another one of our big pieces for our combo. If we don't have our Golem Foundry yet, which is how we can win, sometimes we can just put the game in a situation where we have now made a infinite storm count, and then we gain infinite life with our Weather the Storm. And since these are all copies that go to the stack, even their counter spells aren't going to stop us from doing that. So yeah, that's what we got there in our instance. And over here in our artifact pots, I got three copies of Ashnod's Altar. I see a lot of lists that run two. I have been going at three just to consistently get the altar. I've had a lot of games where like I'm not actually finding the altar until like turn 7 or 8, and that's just not good enough. We want to be able to assemble Tron, find our altar, get our two retrievers, get our go infinite and win. So yeah, I am running three, though I don't want multiple altars filling up my hand, which is why we are not going to go up to four. It's probably not a very good idea. And then I got one copy of Blood Fountain. This creates an extra expendable artifact that we can either use to loot or use it to sacrifice to a deadly dispute or a grim search. And it also lets us bring back, cards from our graveyard if, say, we need to use our our mirror retrievers once more, or any of our other cards like the Kinsmith, I believe. Yes, it's a mirrored Kinsmith. We want to bring back a Kinsmith and find another retriever. We can use our Blood Fountain to do that. I got 3 copies of Chromatic Sphere. This helps us draw cards. We can sacrifice it to our disputes. Helps us fix our mana, which is pretty important in the deck. 4 copies of Chromatic Star, which is just a better version of Chromatic Sphere, since you draw a card when you sacrifice it to your deadly dispute, as well as when you sacrifice it to fix your mana. Big difference with the sphere is that you only get to draw a card when you sacrifice it when you activate its ability. So you don't get to draw an extra card when you use your deadly dispute. And then we got 4 copies of Expedition Map. This basically lets us assemble Tron. So we're running 4 copies. It's a huge part of the deck because if we don't assemble Tron, it's going to be very hard for us to gain an advantage in the game. So having 4 copies is definitely a must. 3 copies of Golem Foundry. Again, you want to be able to get this so you can, when you're going infinite, you want to be able to make infinite golems. It's one of the ways you win the game, either by having, an infinite army of smaller creatures or 3/3 golems, or by gaining infinite life. So you want to be able to do one of the two, hopefully both. That's probably the best route. Um, So yeah, you wanna draw into this. You could go down to 2. I'm at 3 just to trying to help make it as consistent as possible. And then 4 copies of Ichor Wellspring. This helps us dig through our deck and is really great when we sacrifice it to a deadly dispute. And 1 copy of Wizard's Rockets. I've thought about just dropping the spheres entirely for Wizard's Rockets, but the fact that this enters the battlefield tap makes me just want to do maybe 1 or 2. I'm currently at 1. Thought about going up to 2 and just doing an even split with Chromatic Sphere. For now, I'm just trying out 1. This also just lets us draw an extra card with our Deadly Dispute or our Grim Search. So it's a newer card that just came out in the recent Lord of the Rings set and adds quite a bit to the deck. So then in our mana base, we got 3 copies of Crystal Grotto. This helps us dig because it scries when it enters. It's an untapped land, adds generic or colorless mana, and we can also fix our mana with it. So we want to have as many ways to fix our mana. Make sure we're hitting our black and green colors or any of the other colors that we have in our sideboard. Got 1 copy of Haunted Fengraf, another untapped land that also helps us grab creatures from our graveyard in case they did get removed, or we just need to use them again for another reason. 1 copy of Polluted Mire. This is basically just a way to draw up our cards. It's a cycling land. And if we are short on black mana or ways to fix our mana, we definitely want to have at least one black land so that we can play our Deadly Disputes and our Grim Searches. And 1 Public Thoroughfare, another thing to help us fix our mana. This is a newer card too. I've thought about doing a dedicated video on it, though it just seems like there's not going to be a lot to say about it, but it is a new card that just also came out in Murders at Karlov Manor. And definitely seems like it has a good place in Altertron since we have a lot of artifacts that we can tap when this comes into the battlefield. And then, of course, we got 4 copies of each of the Tron lands. So 4 copies of Urza's Mine, 4 copies of Power Plant, and 4 copies of Urza's Tower. And in the sideboard, we got 1 Breath Weapon. So this is a sweeper, helps us, control the board if our aggro friends are getting a little out of control. We can kind of take them out with the breath weapon. Then we also have 3 copies of Cast into the Fire so that we can fight against Affinity, as well as other decks that run very small creatures, like say, fairies, White Weenie. They have lots of little 1/1 birds. Also can be used against Koldatha Red and hit all their little goblins, that sort of thing. And it has a lot of versatility since it also works against artifacts. So, and then we got 3 copies of Duress if we're going up against a control matchup. And honestly, you can bring duress against a lot of things. It's probably best against control, so you can get rid of, their counter spells and their removal, all their interaction pieces. And 2 copies of Fangren Marauder. This is another way to help us gain some life if we're going up against burn. We can also just gain infinite life with this if we need another way outside of our weather the storms. So I've got 2 copies of that and 1 copy of Makeshift Munitions. This is just a this is just another way to kind of deal with our opponent's board presence because we have a lot of expendable artifacts that we can use to just kind of ping them down. You can also use this as a way to just win as well by sacrificing, golems and just killing them because sometimes you don't necessarily have an option to wait till untap. But generally, you're just gonna want to probably just want to use this as a way to control your opponent's board state rather than do a sort of killing move against them like you would do in, say, Synth, for example. But it's definitely seems like a pretty good card for the deck. And then 1 copy of Masked Vandal. And so this is has every creature type, so that is kind of fun. We could get this with our Kinsmith if we wanted to, and so that is one reason why we're running the card. We do have to exile a creature card from our graveyard, which in a way does kind of hurt because we want to be able to keep our creature cards in our graveyard so that we can use them. However, this does let us exile artifacts or enchantments, which can be kind of backbreaking for affinity decks and all the glitters matchups. So it's a very good card, but we just got a one of in the sideboard, and then we got 4 copies of Nihil Spellbomb. So obviously we've talked about this card a lot in other deck lists, but this is a utility artifact that we are going to be using against things like Tolarian Terror and other combo matchups. We got this addition in top of the card that we're talking about today, which we can also use against combo, but is definitely less good against people with the self-milling strategy where they are trying to jam 1 to 2 mana 5/5s. So this kind of helps us stay on top of those decks. But yeah, that's it. This is the deck, guys. This is what I came up with. I'd love to know what you guys think about this card, this Gravestone Strider. Do you think it adds something to Altertron? It's definitely something I am experimenting with right now. I I'm very excited about the card because I think it does add a lot in like lot of different lot of different ways, like we've kind of talked about already in the video. But yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you want to check out the deck list further, of course, there is a link to that in the description. That's going to be it for me today, though. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day, as always, and I will see you all next time.